Hello, everyone, and welcome into Sideline Signal. I am Tyler here with my co-host Andrew. As always, we are ready. We had a wild weekend last week in week 8. We got some games to recap of the two big ones in Georgia and Texas and Tennessee and Alabama. Give you our thoughts on those. Then we head to our playoff prediction 2.0. We hit you with the first one about a month ago. Things have changed drastically. So we're going to give you our top 12 teams if the season ended today or in the way that we're looking forward to the season playing out. And then we're going to give you our next week's predictions. College football, it never stops. The slate is always packed. There's a bunch of good games with a lot of playoff implications this weekend. So we're excited to get into that. But we're going to reflect on this past week 8 with some recaps here. Our first game is going to be Tennessee winning against Alabama, winning 24 to 17. An absolute shock for Alabama, and an absolute crazy game. Andrew, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, what a game. If you're not watching the SEC, you have to get hip. If you're a Big Ten loyalist, you have to start watching some of the SEC. What a fun one this was. I mean, it was a very competitive game. To me, the biggest takeaway from the first half was missed opportunities. It was a 7-0 game for Alabama at the halftime. Both teams had plenty of missed opportunities. The opening drives in the first half for Tennessee, they had two punts, three turnovers, which was two interceptions and a fumble, and then two missed field goals. So they left a lot of points on the board, especially because the pick that Nico threw was actually in Alabama side of the field. They were just outside the red zone, so it was definitely a crucial one on a batted down or like a deflected pass. But yeah, going into the second half, it was still competitive because it was only 7-0. And to be honest, Bama flat out got outplayed. It was all Tennessee in that second half. They just looked better. They were more poised. Dylan Sampson had a crazy game for Tennessee, 139 rushing yards and two touchdowns. So looking at it, I mean, Bama didn't play an awful game. I mean, I'm sure they wanted that first half interception in the end zone back, but they just couldn't get it going. They targeted Ryan Williams a lot, but he wasn't able to get a big breakoff run like he has after catching the ball. And then in the fourth quarter, it was just all Tennessee. Bama just looked flustered, looked like they were punched in the face, and ultimately, Tennessee was able to get the win, which I think is going to have big impacts on the SEC this season.
Across every single conference, does not matter if you're playing in the MAC or the SEC, the better run game in these mid to late season games matters. And Dylan Sampson has been doing that for Tennessee. And that was the difference in my mind because Nico was not amazing. He made plays when he had to, but he was not amazing. Jalen Milrow as well. I felt like this game kind of spoke volumes about him. 25 for 45, 239 yards, a touchdown, two interceptions. He also had 42 rushing yards on 12 attempts, but they also count sacks or I don't know how they calculate that, but very lackluster. And I want to say one thing to these Crimson Tide fans out here. Kalen DeBoer he's not Nick Saban. You're not going to be able to just replace Nick Saban. The only guy that could even sniff it right now is Kirby Smart, and he's not even close to Nick Saban. And so this welcome. Welcome to the life of being a normal college football fan that roots for a team and does not know that they're going to win every game and win every national championship and win every SEC title. So welcome. Tennessee took advantage. Alabama looked bad. They didn't look prepared. That's on Kalen DeBoer. They have the talent. They had more talent than Tennessee going into the game. So this is a game that they're going to be looking back on that they probably feel like they should have won, even though they played so poorly. And there were some questionable throws by Milrow, some questionable reads. It felt like at times he was trying to force it to Ryan Williams when they have plenty of other talented guys out there. Just about every wide receiver on that Alabama roster that touches the field is a 5-star or a 4-star. So these guys can flat out play. So I want to see him spread the ball a little bit in the coming weeks. But we're looking at the reality in which Alabama does not make the playoff, and that's pretty wild. So crazy things are going to have to happen for them to make it. So, I mean, Andrew, what were your thoughts on, you know, the difference between a Nick Saban coached Bama team and a Kalen DeBoer coached Alabama team as we see more and more games?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and I've seen it talked about a lot on different media platforms, is DeBoer's difference in being able to handle the culture of Alabama. Obviously, there's a lot of talent on Alabama every single year, but it just seems like Nick Saban ruled almost with an iron fist compared to the way it seems like Kalen DeBoer is a little too nice. That's a big talking point I've seen a lot. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't hold players accountable. We saw a lot of frustrations out of some of the Bama players when they lost to Vanderbilt, and it really didn't seem like there was any repercussions to them. It didn't seem like DeBoer was angry. I think it was what Malachi Moore.
Malachi Moore.
Yeah,
Yep.
he kicked the ball away out of frustration, which gave Vanderbilt a first down late in the fourth. And yeah, it just doesn't seem like he handles I'll say, egos of the players. Obviously, any team you play on, there's going to be players with egos. But compared to Nick Saban knew that he was going to have people with big egos. That's what you get out of having such a highly talented team. But Nick Saban was able to channel that anger, that frustration, that some of these players would have when they're not playing their best game and make them better players. And I don't think we've seen that out of DeBoer yet. It just seems like he kind of just lets them, kind of fester in their anger if things aren't going the right way. And it ultimately will just bottle up and explode for them. And I think we've seen that over the last 3 weeks, the loss to Vanderbilt, then the struggles against South Carolina, and then obviously this week, the loss to Tennessee. So, DeBoer's going to be on the hot seat in the eyes of the Alabama fans, but if he wants to turn it around, he really has to be able to channel the players' emotions better and have them more focused towards winning.
Yeah, and there was three things that are guaranteed in a Nick Saban, when he recruited you. You were going to get an education, you were probably going to make the NFL, and you were never going to be given anything. You had to earn every single thing, and you could see it. Kalen DeBoer, he's given things away. Clearly, I think just by watching the body, the body positioning of the players, the physical, motions, is that he goes in after these games and at halftime and tells them that they're amazing. Where you need to be laying into these guys. This is ridiculous. It is week 9 now, and Alabama is on the outside of the playoffs looking in, needing a lot of help. When is the last time you could say that? I don't know. I got to think like a decade, maybe,
Probably
and
the
more.
AJ McCarron era.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. And he Nick Saban, of course, impossible shoes to fill, but he did leave you a Lamborghini. Like it's not like Alabama football programs in shambles or anything. They're a well-oiled machine. They pump out NFL players year after year. The expectation shouldn't be the same for what it was for Nick Saban, but Kalen DeBoer, it's warming up a little bit. I wouldn't go out and say hot seat, maybe in the eyes of the fans, but in the eyes of the boosters, the guys with the money that are funding this program, you got to be a little worried if you're Kalen DeBoer. He's got a show, and they got a big game that we'll talk about against Missouri coming up this week. But oh, you have anything to say?
Yeah, I was going to say just one little thing is the thing that I've noticed a lot too is that it doesn't seem like this Alabama squad is able to handle adversity at all. And I think that's one thing that you had with Nick Saban is your team was always going to be able to handle adversity. I mean, every single year it felt like there were some games where Alabama was in a dogfight where we're tuning in being like, "Oh my gosh, is this middle of the pack SEC is Mississippi State going to pull off the upset? Is this going to be the year that Alabama falls?" And they never did. They were always able to handle when they were running with a team that they were far better than, but the team was just running with them. They're always able to handle that adversity and play through to get the win at the end. And it doesn't feel like that this team has this. I know you said you texted me, I think it was week 2 when they played South Florida, saying this wasn't the same Alabama team. And it really isn't. Like you can see all emotions go out in the Vandy loss, especially. They had so many players that just had their head down, looked like they had given up. And it's like you had every opportunity to win this game if you just roll with the punches. And it doesn't feel like they can handle that adversity. So, they still have some difficult games on this schedule and they need a lot of help. I don't know if they can get it done.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning of the adversity because, as you said, tough games ahead. You're going to get a lot of scrutiny from the media. You're going to get a lot of scrutiny on campus. I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama football players are getting trash talked in class. Like, that is something that is new to them. I know it. I can't tell you, like, they're gods in Tuscaloosa, those guys, but now they look human. So there's going to be some criticism thrown your way. Not necessarily fair, but it's going to be there, and we'll see how they deal with that moving forward. On to another SEC matchup. I mean, I live for these now. A top 5 matchup at the time, a crazy game. Not at all what I don't think either one of us expected was going to happen. But now, number 2, Georgia went into Austin, Texas, and beat then number one, now number five, Texas 30-15, an ugly game by all stretches. What did you think about it?
Yeah, ugly was definitely the right word to put it. It was a sloppy game. I was expecting maybe not the highest scoring game, but a good duel where, I used my frame of reference as the Oregon-Ohio State game, by all means, which was a very balanced game, really back and forth. So I thought we were going to get similar to that. And I guess in a sense it was, but it was a really sloppy game. There were seven total turnovers between both teams, and neither of the quarterbacks played anywhere near great football. I think the key thing for me, obviously, why Georgia was able to beat Texas was how good their D line played and Jalen Walker at linebacker played. Because the pressure that they got on Quinn Ewers and then the one drive Arch Manning played. So I'll just say the Texas quarterbacks, the pressure that they were able to get on them was insane. It looked like the right tackle and the right guard for Texas had never played a game of football in their life because the edge rushers on that side were just getting through clean. I think that was a big reason why the offense stalled out for Texas. You got to keep in mind, Texas was averaging, I think, around 519 total offensive yards each game. And they went in and got shut down by that D line. And like I said, offensively, both teams played sloppy. There was that really, really weird sequence with the terrible DPI call, and then the fans throwing the beer on the field, and then the refs come together and overturn the call. Listen, it wasn't DPI. The ref had already called it. So, in my opinion, because of the delay, you can't go and overturn it because Kirby Smart was yelling at him saying we were going to run a play, and then you wouldn't have been able to overturn it. So, I think they double messed up on that play. But ultimately, Trevor Etienne was probably the one bright spot in that Georgia offense. I wasn't really uh, fired up about either of the team's offenses, but to me, Georgia's D line was really impressive, and that's ultimately why they got the win.
Yeah, and the trenches always win. And as you said, the Georgia was a better team in the trenches, and that's how it was. And it speaks to you in your run game, and it speaks to you in your sack numbers and your defensive line numbers, which obviously Georgia won in. Georgia may have gotten the W, but Carson Beck has officially been placed in my mid thoughts. Like I said I was thinking about it before, the system quarterback, blah, blah, blah. This flatly put it in. There was not a single play of that game that where I was thinking, oh yeah, Carson Beck should be a top 10 pick. No shot. And I know he made some great throws. He did what he had to. They won the game. That's what you're talking about. But if we're going to put a top 10 pick and put the next 6 years of an NFL franchise onto the shoulders of this kid, it's got to be better than this. It's got three picks, 175 yards. You threw the ball 41 times and you couldn't get to 200 yards. Bad, just bad. But they got the dub. ETN was the most impressive, as you said, three touchdowns. Quinn Ewers actually statistically did not have a terrible game, but it didn't tell the story. He was 25 for 43, 211, two touchdowns and a pick. He didn't really have time, but he didn't look great when he had time anyway. It was lack of separation by the wide receivers, but also just combined with Ewers missing throws left and right. So both of these quarterbacks, in my mind, sank a little bit. You got to take it with a grain of salt almost because both defenses are wildly talented, but not impressive from either.
Yeah, and looking at Texas going forward, it seems like every week we had kind of thought that there was going to be a team that was that, okay, they're the clear natty favorite. What are your thoughts on Texas moving forward after this loss? Do you think they'll bounce back? You think they're going to fall off slightly? Could we see them winning the natty? What is your take on this?
So I don't see them imploding in the way that Alabama kind of has, like a mini implode, we'll call it that. Um, this is not an easy game this week. They're going to Vandy. Vandy just beat Alabama a couple weeks ago. They're ranked now. This is going to be the biggest game in Vanderbilt football history, probably. I expect every single person that goes to Vanderbilt with any mind for football to be at that game. So it's going to be wild and raucous. They also have to play Texas A&M at the end of the year. That is no cakewalk. They have Ole Miss on the schedule as well. I think Steve Sarkisian's a good enough coach to get this figured out because you don't play another defense like Georgia's. There is only one defense like Georgia's, and it's Georgia's. So you can bounce back from this, but you never take a win for granted from now on. You never take a lead for granted from now on. I want to see it get tightened up. I still think that they're firmly in playoff contention. They could still be in contention for the SEC title game, as you see, kind of like a jumble at the top. But there's growing concern for sure. If Quinn Ewers were to come out against Vandy and look lackluster, and then they end up putting Arch in, that destroys it for me. You cannot make the QB change. That will determine a lot unless Arch starts the rest of the season. You can't do that again. Ewers was a little shaken up, but I didn't think it was an actual injury per se. So to do that, that shook him. I know it did. It would shake any player if you get benched for a drive just to see what. No, this is the guy that's been breathing down your neck every single second since you've gotten to Austin. So if you're gonna do that, no QB change. As long as that happens, I think they'll be fine in the long run.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because there is a lot of difficulty left on that Texas schedule. I agree with you. I think you can't really afford to change the quarterback unless you're going to start him and then play him the rest of the season. You can't have that two quarterback system anymore in terms of confidence. But it's going to be really just interesting to see because Texas A&M, that's a team we talked about a little. They have really two difficult games left. It's the game at Texas at the end of the season and then LSU this weekend. But if A&M can go in, it's at home for A&M. There's a chance they could get upset and be out of this playoff. So you got to take this one on the chin, this loss to Georgia, but you can't lose sight of your goal because right now, I really don't think that we could see a two loss. There might be one two-loss team that could get into the playoffs, but realistically, the way things are looking, I don't know if we'll see a two-loss team in. So it's kind of back to the old days of the four playoff system where you lose a game, you got to be perfect now. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think Texas will be fine, like you said, but they gotta fix things because while they probably have played the best defense they'll play all season now, you can't let them you can't lose to Texas or sorry, you can't lose to Georgia 2 weeks in a row.
That's exactly, you took the words right out of my mind there. You can't lose to them twice. And we're going to see because Vanderbilt's going to be hungry. Cannot overlook this one. It actually, I think it kind of favors them a little bit that Vanderbilt's actually ranked because now they can't. They can't overlook them because it is a big game, but should be really interesting as we kind of move on here too. As Andrew said, maybe no two loss teams in, maybe one two loss team in. We're going to give you our second playoff prediction, not with full records or anything. We're not going to go as in depth as the first one. The third one would be more in depth as we get closer to conference championship week. But Andrew, would you like to give me your first four seeds, the conference champs of this playoff?
I would love to. And to preference for our fans listening, I'm doing it based on my thoughts of how the season's going to end, not where the season is right now. I kind of went through, looked at the schedules, did some predictions. So to start, my number one overall seed in the college football playoffs is going to be the Big Ten champion, which is Ohio State University. I think it's going to be really close. I think they'll win the remainder of their games, including Penn State and Indiana. They'll go out, they'll win out. Obviously, they lost earlier in the season to University of Oregon in a 1 point game at Autzen Stadium. But I think looking forward to the Big Ten championship, it is really hard for you to beat a team twice in one season. And I think Oregon knows that. Oregon has faced that before in the past. They struggle when they win the first game, they tend to lose the second matchup. So I think on a neutral site, I think the home field at Autzen was a big impact on Ohio State, and I think that was part of the reason Oregon beat them. Saw a lot of false starts and some delay games, some struggles communicating. But being on a neutral site, I think that favors Ohio State, and they're going to be hungry to win that rematch. And I think it's going to be another close game, but I think Ohio State might get the better of Oregon in that one, so they'll win. And I think the Big Ten, in terms of consistency, will be the top conference this year, so they get the 1 seed. My 2 seed is Georgia. Big win over Texas. Some people are starting to talk about Texas being overrated. I don't think they're as overrated as a lot of people think. They're going to win out in my eyes. Still have some tough games, but Georgia, they're another machine in the SEC. I think they'll win out. I think they'll win the SEC championship. Kirby Smart's going to kick them into high gear. They're my number 2 seed. My third seed is my Big 12 champion, and this might be a surprise. I went with Kansas State. And right now, obviously, they're not at the top of the Big 12. You got BYU and Iowa State ahead of them, both undefeated. But those two teams haven't looked that solid. BYU barely beats now 3-4 Oklahoma State at home. Jake Retzloff was able to turn it around, but that first half was shaky. Honestly, if Rangel for Oklahoma State didn't get hurt, I think Oklahoma State wins the game because Alan Bowman came in and was miserable. So I think I have them losing the Holy War, going to Rice Eccles. It's a game they're prone to choke. I think BYU lose that game, and Iowa State barely beat UCF this week. And they still have some difficult games, including Kansas State at the end of the season to round off conference play before conference championship week. I think Kansas State beat Iowa State, and I think that jumps them into the Big 12 championship where I have them going on to beat BYU in that conference championship. So might be a little surprised, but I really like what Avery Johnson's been doing this season. I think he's going to kick it into high gear. He's only a sophomore. He's doing his thing. I think K-State right now will win the Big 12 for me. And then rounding out with the ACC, I have Clemson upsetting Miami in the conference championship. 3 weeks in a row now. Miami barely beat teams that they're far better than. They can't keep that up. It's unsustainable. Clemson, after the Georgia loss week one, has looked really good. Good win over UVA this weekend. I think they keep rolling. I think they upset Miami, and that's my 4 seed. So OSU, Georgia, K-State, and then Clemson are my top four.
And I'm happy that we have a different order because we have three of the four same teams, unfortunately, for our listeners out there. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of run through mine, the ones that are the same as Andrew's, and then I'm going to explain my other one here. So for my 1 seed, I'm actually going to go with Georgia in the SEC championship. I just think, I'm basing this off of my own thoughts, not the committee's, because we have no idea yet. But I'm going to say that strength of schedule kind of counts and they're going to have more wins over ranked opponents. And that's really what pushes the envelope there over that Big Ten title game champion. For my number 2 seed, I'm going to go Ohio State. I agree with Andrew. It's hard to beat a team twice. I don't think that takes anything away from Oregon. They're still an amazing team, but at a neutral site, not on at home as Oregon had them, I think Ohio State edges it out. I think it's going to be an instant classic, just as the one a couple of weeks ago was. But I'll take Ohio State there. My 3 seed, I'm going to go with Clemson. It's the same top three that I had in my original. I just love what Clemson's doing right now. I wish, like, I am a Clemson hater in general, but they have looked very impressive. They've been able to run, they've been able to throw. The defense is what we expect it to be for a Dabo Sweeney coach team. Very good. The schedule has some challenges, but nothing huge. And I think they beat Miami because, as Andrew said, Miami's been playing down to the teams, and you cannot do that. I could see Clemson actually punching Miami in the mouth in that game and beating them by 2 or 3 scores. But obviously, we'll have to see. Then my fourth one, the Big 12 championship. I mean, the Big 12 is an absolute madhouse. Anything can happen. It's awesome. The SEC is two right now, but it's a bit the lines are a bit different. But there's any number of 6 or 7 teams that could win the Big 12 in some way, shape, or form, all the way down to the bottom of the conference, to be completely honest. Like anyone could win. There's only a couple teams that are completely out of it. I'm gonna go with Brigham Young as my Big 12 title game winner here, and I'll give you some reasons. I know what Andrew said, that Oklahoma State game was bad, but the thing that I liked was that they were able to battle through adversity. I've talked about this at nauseum, both NFL and college football. The team that can get down and get back up, that's the one that I love. They're going to UCF this weekend. That's a tough game. They got to win that one. As Andrew said, gave Iowa State a scare last week. They got to win that one by 2+ possessions for me to feel as confident. The Holy War that week after, I think without Cam Rising or with a beaten up Cam Rising, as we saw last weekend or this past weekend, it was real ugly when Cam Rising was out there. He does not look like a quarterback, or is he shut down for the year? He might be shut down
I
for the
think
year.
I think they're considering shutting him down because of the finger injury because they had the press conference with the head coach of Utah and he said that Cam Rising was considering taking his 8th year with a
Oh
medical
my
waiver.
Lord. Oh my Lord. He's going to be 26 or 27 playing college football. That should be illegal except for Australian punters. But uh, that's a tough game. The one at Arizona State, that's the one that I'm looking at that's going. I think even if they lose that game, they still make the Big 12 title game because of that win over K-State. I think Iowa State does their thing, goes undefeated, beats Kansas State. That's where Andrew and I kind of disagree there. And then BYU beats them because they've been able to. But that'll be a great game. I'm rooting for both of those teams. So, yeah, my top four, there's no other really needed explanation other than that, I would say. So, my top four teams, number one, Georgia, number two, Ohio State, number three, Clemson, and number four, BYU. Andrew, you want to give us our 5 through 12? This is where it gets wild.
Yeah, I'll round them out and I'll probably shorten up my explanations so we don't bore our viewers. But number five, I'm going to Oregon. I think they're the best of the at-larges. They're only lost in the conference title to Ohio State. I think Oregon has a serious shot at winning the Natty this year. Consistency is key. I don't think the loss in the conference title game will have any strain on them. So I have them at five, which would be funny because if they go on and win the first round game, they would end up playing Ohio State in a rematch in the quarterfinals. But yeah, number six, I went with my group of five, Boise State. They've been the most consistent of the group of fives. There's a lot of teams that are gunning, Army, Navy, depending on how it shakes up, they could be a team to punch in. Liberty, who knows? But right now, Boise State have looked like the best. I'm really hoping Ashton Genty can go and break that Barry Sanders rushing record, but they look good. You look at their resume, their only loss, which is now even more impressive, is a 3-point loss at Autzen Stadium against number one Oregon. So that's really pushing them forward. That's helping them a lot. They look like a competitive team. I think when looking at the group of five, they're probably the most competitive compared to the other teams that will get in as playoff teams. So I got Boise State at six. Number seven, Miami. I think the fact that they've struggled in close games against teams in the ACC plus the loss in the conference championship will dip them a little. Not concerned though. Xavier Restrepo's been doing his thing. Cam Ward still looks like a Heisman contender. Cristobal will either get the team up to play in the playoffs or they're going to crumble. But I have them at seven. I went Notre Dame at eight. Definitely a team that's kind of not talked about a lot. Definitely a team that has to be perfect from now on because they don't have a conference title game. Some more difficult games. They got to play Army and Navy. Still got to play USC, who's been mediocre this year, but still a rivalry game. So some difficult games, but I think they're resume boosters in reality. I think they win out, and because of that, they'll get in as an at-large. Definitely going to be interesting though to see how that loss to NIU gets factored in terms of the ratings. I kind of pushed them down a little bit lower because of that, but who knows? Nine, Penn State. I think they lose to Ohio State and they won't get into the championship game because of that. I don't think it's a strain on Penn State. They're playing some good football right now. Tyler Warren's probably the best tight end in all of college football. Offense has been doing it. Will Drew Aller be able to get it done in the playoffs? Who knows? I have them at nine though. Uh, Following a similar line as that, my number 10 team is Indiana. I think looking at their schedule remaining, their only tough game realistically left on their schedule is the Ohio State matchup. I don't think they win, but Kurt Shinetti in his first year going 11-1 in the regular season, I think is going to be big. I think they'll sneak in as an at-large. I have them at 10, but like they could easily be the 12 team because I think it's just going to come down to the committee of what's super important. I think it's going to slightly get them in, even though the resume is probably not the strongest in comparison. But I think, 11-1 is going to get them in. Number 11, I have Texas. And I think the fact, similarly to Indiana, I don't think the resume is that impressive because the teams that they've won, where it was like, oh, that's a big win, they're falling off. Oklahoma, unranked, not a good team right now. And the same with Michigan. Michigan is kind of awful. So right now, in my eyes, outside of the loss to Georgia, their biggest win is UL Monroe in terms of record. Not the best resume, although I don't think it's going to be enough to knock them out if they can win out. Because the games, like I said, they still gotta play A&M to end the season. They got Vandy this week. There's games that'll help their resume. I think they'll sneak in at the lower half of the 12, but they could definitely be a team from that 11 spot to kind of make some upsets and push deep into the playoffs. And then rounding out my college football playoff, my 12 seed is Brigham Young University, BYU. Uh, One loss. I think they lose the Holy War. I don't think it's going to negatively impact them. BYU have been consistent all season. They've shown some signs of getting upset, but I think they'll fight and win. I think they're going to be that last team just to sneak in because I don't have them going to the championship game. I think it's going to be just like Indiana and Penn State, where the regular season record is going to be just enough and it's going to be good enough on paper to get them in. I believe my championship game is, I think it's Iowa State,
Yeah.
Kansas State again in a rematch, and Kansas State beats them twice. But yeah, so I don't have Iowa State making it in. BYU round out my 12 team playoff. So I guess I'll, hand the floor over to you. You can either give me your thoughts on my team or if you want to wait and do your team and then us have a discussion, feel free.
We have pretty similar kind of trains of thought. There was only one big difference, and a couple of the seedings are different. So I'm going to be nice and short here. So number five, Oregon. Definitely agree with you. Maybe well, I have them losing that Big Ten title game as you did as well, but clearing away, like if we were just ranking teams in the top four conference, like champs weren't the top four seeds, they would be, in my eyes, the third team ranked. So they're at that five spot. Six, I'm going to go with Penn State at number six. I think they lose to Ohio State, and let me tell you why. It's an absolute crime, by the way. So they play Ohio State at home in 2 weeks, right? Halloween weekend, November 2nd. Guess what time the game is?
Did a noon kickoff?
It's a noon kickoff because a big noon kickoff. Are you kidding? It couldn't be the whiteout game. That's why they lose. Believe it or not, Happy Valley's more rowdy at 8 p.m. than it is at noon. And I promise you, the fans will be just as drunk, but it's not going to be nearly, nearly as volatile as an environment as it could be. So I think Ohio State wins that game because of it. Penn State wins out besides that, doesn't make the Big Ten title game because of Oregon, and kind of benefits from that and ends up making it. So yeah, three of my top six teams are from the Big Ten, which some may think is pretty wild, but I don't. I think the Big Ten and the SEC are neck and neck, basically in terms of the quality of teams as we get further into the season. At number seven, I'm going to go with Miami. I think they just barely breeze by. As you've been saying, they've been playing down to teams. They face Clemson, as I said. I think they lose by two or three scores, but they still get that seventh seed because of what they were able to do behind Cam Ward. Good defense, stuff like that. So I think they're going to settle in as my seventh seed with that one loss. My eighth seed is going to be Texas with the one loss. I think they win out, and I think that helps them a lot. But the fact that they didn't make the title game, in my mind, drops them back a bit. The reason why I said I put Penn State above is because Penn State has looked way more impressive in their wins. The offensively, kind of grinded out games sometimes, but they were able to get it done. They've looked great. There hasn't been a game where I'm sitting there going like they really underplayed. Besides Bowling Green, I forgot about that. Bowling Green week two was an issue, but. They've looked great besides that. Their offense has been really fluid. So that's why I went with that. But I still think Texas makes it, hosts a game, which is a pretty big deal, and gets that eighth seed. At the ninth spot, I'm going to go with Iowa State. I have them beating Kansas State. That's the only real difference between me and Andrew in terms of the Big 12. But I have them losing to BYU. I think it's really close. It could go either way. I could put Iowa State at 4 and BYU at 9. It doesn't really matter at that point if they're both undefeated going into the conference game. They get in because they have a better resume than the team behind them, who also has one loss in Notre Dame at 10. That NIU loss, it pushes them all the way back to not being higher than 10 or 11 in my mind. And I get it. That was a long time ago, but it still happened. And NIU is not undefeated right now. If you guys check their records, they are a middle of the pack MAC team, which makes it look way worse. Probably the worst loss of anyone that anyone has in the top 15 teams right now. I really think so. Even with Missouri getting blown out, I know they're not in the top 15, but Missouri lost by 39 to Texas A&M. I would argue that Notre Dame's loss to NIU is just about the same as that, which is crazy. But in my eyes, that's what it is. So I got them at 10, still making it in. Army, Navy, and USC are their toughest games left, but I think they handled those, get through them. Number 11, I'm going to sound like such a homer, but there's a reason for this, and I really like this team. I'm going to go LSU, the only two-loss team to get in. And the argument for me is the one-loss Indiana, as Andrew has in, versus that two-loss LSU team that ends up making the SEC title game, losing to Georgia. That's their second loss there. They still got to play Texas A&M this weekend. That's the biggest game on their schedule left. They play Alabama at home. They also play at Oklahoma and home against Vanderbilt. So it's still really tough. But I think they fight through. They showed me a lot this weekend. That's kind of why I put them in because I was down on this team. I really was. I did not think that they were legit, but Saturday proved it to me, winning by 24 or at Arkansas, the team that just beat Tennessee. So I got LSU sliding in there at 11. And then my group of five, I'm going to go with Boise State. I think they take care of business on Friday at UNLV. We'll get into that, but or we can skip me for that prediction. Sorry for giving it away, but I'm going to go with Boise State as the most impressive. Army and Navy are definitely worth a talking to, even with a loss to Notre Dame, because they've looked great. But Ashton Genty has catapulted this entire program. I wouldn't be surprised if Boise State's able to compete once they get into the Pac-12, even win it or compete against anyone in the country, honestly, because of the boost in recruiting that I think Ashton Genty gives this program going into the future. But I'm not going to go against him. I think they win out, win the Mountain West, and get in that 12 seed there. So, yeah, I know that was a lot of talking for both of us. We both just went on a crazy amount of time there, but it's going to be exciting. The point is that college football is freaking awesome, and anything can happen.
Yeah, it's really been an unpredictable season. We talked about it at nauseum before we started recording, but there's a lot of things that could happen. A team that we neither of us have in our list that could maybe squeak in, a team like Pitt. Pitt's currently undefeated. There's about 16 teams right now fighting for those final six spots as the at-larges. So it's going to be hard doing bracketology. We won't know until the first committee rankings comes out, kind of what teams are favored and what we can expect out of it. But I'm loving it. We could go on for like 7 hours talking about bracketology. So we love it. College football is great, but I think it's time. Let's move on to our big game predictions for this weekend or week. Obviously, there's a few that we'll cover that start earlier in the week than Saturday. Um, a lot of other good games, some interesting games where we kind of get to gauge where teams are at, and we get to just get a read as we get closer and closer to the committee. So to start, Thursday night game. Kind of talked about them earlier, just a few minutes ago. Pitt versus Syracuse, Thursday night. Interesting game. I'm sure not a lot of people are going to be watching because of the Thursday night football game from NFL, but we will be watching this game, or at least I will be watching this game. Give me your thoughts, though. What do you think goes on? Who do you think wins?
So there is a I would say in my mind, I'm staying away from this betting wise because it is 50-50 in my head. I know Pitt's got the better record. They're ranked. Syracuse has stumbled a little bit, but these guys are like the identical. They're both rocking with quarterbacks that are outplaying what are their expectations of. They got pretty good defenses, not amazing, but very good. They have a decent running game, but it's mostly been the quarterback dishing out the ball. I'm gonna take the home team. I think the Carrier Dome, that environment affects Pitt and Syracuse, and the Syracuse Orange take the W. A huge one, shakes up the entire ACC. Pitt's dreams of getting to the ACC title game just got a little harder. They still do play Miami later in the year, which is going to be a huge game. We kind of saw that Miami was going to make the playoff back when Pitt kind of stunk, and Pitt beat them at Pittsburgh. I don't know if you remember that. It was either 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even longer. But that was a crazy game. But I really just think that the X factor in this game, it's going to be close. Is Kyle McCord outduels Eli Holstein? I think both of them have great futures. I don't know what class McCord's in. I don't know if he's a junior or a senior. I forget exactly. I don't know if this is his last year, but if he does come back, or if he transfers, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up back at a big name school next year. I feel like almost if Ohio State didn't treat him so poorly on his way out, that he would go back there. Even. But I think he outduels them. I think it's going to be a great game, a lot of everything, and I think Syracuse ekes out a win, a huge ACC win. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we have it going the same way. I have Syracuse in a close one. I think the Pitt hype train has been great, but I think this is just a setback where they kind of temper their expectations for the season. They're bowl eligible already. They've had a phenomenal season. But going to Syracuse has proven to be tough, and I think Syracuse love to rise in these, primetime night games. I mean, they played Friday night a few weeks ago against UNLV when UNLV had gotten into the top 25, and they snuck away with a win in overtime. I agree, though. I think Kyle McCord's going to be the X factor in this game. I think if you look at it in a tight game, who's going to be the X factor? It's Kyle McCord. I think that experience playing at his time with Ohio State has made him more successful with Syracuse in these tighter games because Syracuse is a team that would have fumbled and lost to UNLV in OT a few weeks back. But Kyle McCord's really kind of changed I guess, the viewpoint of Syracuse. Obviously, they're not undefeated, but I think this is the start of the setbacks for Pitt. I think it's going to be close, but going to the Carrier Dome's tough. Kyle McCord's going to have a good game in my eyes. Give me Syracuse.
And there's something to be said about domes and noise, because Syracuse could sound like Penn State or LSU just because it's enclosed. So if there are people there and they're showing out, it's going to be super loud. The hardest thing Holstein's ever faced in his career. So as a young QB, kind of getting your legs in a Power Four conference, like this is a big game. And if he's able to pull it out, I got some respect for Pitt. But we're both going with Syracuse there. On to our next weekday game, the biggest group of five game yet of the year. Number 17, Boise State travels to Vegas to play UNLV at 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday. So many implications based off of this. We've been waiting for this matchup, Andrew and I, all year. We're like, all right, what's going to happen? Obviously, UNLV is no longer, or yeah, they lost to Syracuse, obviously, no longer undefeated. But this is just a huge game for group of five teams across the country. This is a big game for Army and Navy as well, and Liberty, and all of the teams vying for it. Memphis as well, someone that has been completely forgotten about, but is 6-1. This is a big game for them. So, Andrew, how do you have things shaken out?
Yeah, you talked about it and you hit the nail on the head. This is a big implications game for the group of five because, in my eyes, this is essentially a preview of the Mountain West Championship game. Two of the top teams, the two best teams, arguably, in the Mountain West. But I have Boise State winning it. Obviously, I have them in my rankings. It would be insane if UNLV can get this win off, but I don't think they have it just yet. Like I said, they had every opportunity to go and beat Syracuse when they did. They were at home, should have controlled the game, but they weren't able to get it done. And I think that's going to be the difference because right now, Maddox Mazden's been playing phenomenal at quarterback. He's really been that leader that they need. And who is stopping Ashton Genty right now? You can't. And I don't see him getting stopped in this matchup. I think this is another one where he's going to rush for 200 plus, multiple touchdowns. Mazden's going to have a good game. They're just going to get Genty going. And if you can't stop him, you're not going to win the game. I don't think they're going to stop him. So I think it's a touchdown plus, maybe 14 points, but I have Boise State winning. But who knows, if this game goes the other way and UNLV wins, I have no idea who the current group of five champ would be.
It would be absolute madness. I'm here for it, but at the same time, I kind of want to see Ashton Genty play one of those Power Four great defenses and see what he does. Kind of like Oregon. He gave them a show. I want to see him give some other team a show as well in the playoff. Not for that reason. Like I still think logically Boise State wins this game. I do wonder how much of a home field advantage UNLV is going to have, because it is Vegas, and I feel like a lot of people are going to be there trying to cash Ashton Genty's over on the rushing yards. So that'll be interesting. I was actually wrong about the time. It is 10:30 Eastern, not 8 o'clock on Friday. But I think Genty balls. I think Andrew summed it up quite well. Genty balls. I'm convinced that if you put Ashton Genty in a straitjacket in a dark room, he would escape it with the amount of broken tackles he's had. He is insane. I've never seen anything like it. I hope he breaks the record because I want to see greatness. He's already great. If he stopped running today, I would never forget this season for a long time. I think Boise State wins. I just don't see a team that can stop him, as Andrew said. I don't think it really matters. I think this could be a shootout, in a crazy one, in a great game, and we're gonna both be watching it with our eyes like an inch away from the TV, just trying to scan every detail of it. But I think Boise State pulls it out and kind of confirms that they're the best team in the group of five.
Yeah, big implications. Going to be a big game. It's a late night for us. I mean, I'm not doing anything, so I'm going to be up till 2 a.m. I'm probably going to make a TikTok about it. But yeah, could easily shake up the whole world of college football as we know it. We're both excited for the game, and I guess we just got to wait for the outcome. Moving on, teams that we've talked about a little bit in regards to our playoffs, but probably, honestly, probably the game of the week, if you ask me, in terms of, rankings. We have LSU taking on Texas A&M. It's at Texas A&M. I know this is your team, and I know what you're probably going to say, so I'll start off with you. You got LSU winning this one?
Yeah, but I am not confident. And like I said, guys, I told you this two weeks ago, last week. I'm not picking against my team. That is a bad omen. I believe in LSU, but this is going to be the hardest game that they play, I think, the entire year. It's going to be loud. It's in the biggest stadium in the country. Texas A&M knows if they win this game, all they got to beat is Texas, and they're in. They're in. So this is there's a lot of hunger. This is the first of many roadblocks, or not the first, I should say the third, technically, in my mind, of the many roadblocks that LSU has to face in this gauntlet of an SEC schedule. I think LSU wins in a close one. And I said this last week with Arkansas, if they were going to win, they had to get Caden Durham above 100. He got exactly 100. And then they were going to have to keep Taylor Green in the pocket, which they did. The defense looked great. Swinson looked amazing. Major Burns had a couple of sacks from the secondary again. It's going to be the same key. Sorry, I have to mention this as well. Whit Weeks, 18 total tackles, amazing. He was great as well, including a pick. But it's going to be the same keys. If Whit Weeks gets 20 tackles, I bet you LSU wins. Like if he can control the run game, and they might be a little heavy on that since Connor Wegman is still coming back. It is his second game since the injury. So that'll be a little interesting. And do we see Marcel Reed? I have seen LSU struggle against pure running quarterbacks. So I do wonder if there's a package for him in there. And I am worried about that. But it's going to be one in the trenches, as is every single big game across the Big Ten, SEC, the ACC. It all matters about the trenches. And I am confident that LSU can win that and win it by like a field goal. There's also like a 2% chance that we see 74-72, seven overtimes again. Because both offenses are pretty potent right now. But this one's going to be one of the trenches. I have confidence that LSU beats them there and they squeak out a win at Kyle Field, which is going to be insane. And I'm going to be so happy if that happens. But Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I disagree with you. Obviously, I am fading you. I agree it's going to be a really close game. Trenches are going to be super important. But I think to me, one of the biggest things that I highlighted when I was looking at this game is going to be the quarterback play. Like you said, Wegman's he's been a little shaky, but it looked solid since he's come back from injury. He's still recovering. And then Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, he has been a tale of two quarterbacks in games. He'll be really good at times and really, really rough at times. So all to me it is which quarterback is going to outplay the other, which team is going to see more consistency out of their quarterback. Because like you said, both teams have a potent offense. Each team can run and gun with the other when they're hot. But which quarterback's going to be hotter? Are we going to see one that's super cold to start and then the other runs away with it? Is it going to be neck, back and forth, the whole time? I don't know. I think it's going to be close, but to me, I look at it, I think Wegman will slightly outplay Nussmeier. There's too much inconsistency out of Nussmeier for me right now to be confident in him. I also highlighted, like you said, I think Whit Weeks will be an impact in the game. And if A&M can make him a non-factor, I think they'll be able to win this game. But if Whit Weeks, like you said, gets 20 tackles, LSU could easily win it. But ultimately, too, I think the home crowd at Kyle Field is going to be a massive impact. It gets loud and it gets rowdy there. I don't know how Nussmeier is going to handle that. And that's the biggest concern for me. I don't know how he'll handle the noise. So I have A&M winning in a close one. But like you said, it really is a pick 'em. I'm not going to be surprised if either team wins this. I'm not going to be upset if either team wins this. But I'm just going with the home team on this one. Slightly favored for me, but it's going to be close.
Yeah, and one last thing before we move on to our next game. This game is going to say a lot about the coaches as well. Mike Elko, obviously his first year at Texas A&M, his alma mater. This is a huge game. You just blew out Missouri at home. The fans are going to be rabid. If you can get this done, I think everyone forgets about the Notre Dame loss. And they start anointing him as the next great Texas A&M coach. And then for Brian Kelly. Oh my goodness, man. He stinks of mid for most of the season, but they've been getting it done this year. If they can win this game, I'm gonna believe in him again. If not, if they lose this game, I'm back to thinking, why did we even bother with him in the first place? If it were up to me, Coach O would still be the coach of LSU at this point. But Brian Kelly, this is a win it, prove it kind of game. Because like I said, this is gonna be the start of a rough stretch for them that's going to say a lot about the character of these players and him as a coach. So it should be close. My heart says LSU. My mind says I don't know. So I went with LSU there. But moving on to our only neutral site game. This is a wonky game. We got Navy playing against Notre Dame at MetLife Stadium at noon. I wanted to get tickets, but I was unable to, unfortunately. But this is going to be a crazy game. I mean, Navy is ranked. Uh, this is the biggest game on the schedule for sure, besides Army. Um, Notre Dame needs to win. It's every game is a win. Every game is an elimination game for them in my eyes. Andrew, who do you got? I mean, it is neutral, like I said. It almost favors Navy on the geographic location.
It does, but I don't know. This is a hard game for me to predict. I was looking at it, and I like it's the same with the Army Notre Dame matchup. I really don't know because both Navy and Army defied all expectations. I don't think anybody expected them both to be top 25, sitting 7-0 rolling into this week. I love it. I come from an Army family. We're beat Navy every year. But I don't know. And this is a game where we get to learn about how legit both of these teams are. If Navy can run with them and get the win, I think Navy's a playoff team if they can beat Army. Same with Army Notre Dame down the line. But I don't know because the AAC isn't the toughest conference. Navy hasn't really played at like an up there team yet. The resume isn't very strong. This is the resume booster for them. And, the neutral site definitely will play into their favor. It's not like they're going to Notre Dame. They're not going to Indiana. But yeah, I don't know. I think Notre Dame's going to win. I just unfortunately think this is the end of the hot streak for Navy. I think Riley Leonard's going to have a big game, but it all depends on how they start. If Navy start off hot, if they can get a turnover, a three and out, and then score on the opening drive and get that momentum from the start, I think they have a shot at it. But if Notre Dame control the game from start to finish, they'll win. And so give me Notre Dame. I don't know score wise. I can't really read this game that well, but give me Notre Dame.
I just want to present two facts towards the jury before we decide on this game, and this might go against my picks, but uh, Navy has their closest game was 14 points over Memphis, who, like I said, is 6-1, so that is their best win, but not a great win by in terms of the landscape of college football, as you mentioned. They also have not scored less than 30 points yet this year as a triple option team that just learned what the forward pass was this year. So did Army. For some reason, now they have quarterbacks that can sling it, which is awesome. But in my mind, like I'm going to take Notre Dame here, but it is a shaky take. It really is. I think there's a world where Navy has the ball for like the entire second half and maybe it's a one score game and they literally just bleed the entire fourth quarter and kick a field goal at the end and win. Like I could see that, but then I could also see Notre Dame going out there because Navy's defense isn't amazing. They have given up 44 to Memphis, as I just mentioned. Memphis is a good team, but they're not Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame's head and shoulders above. Like you said, if Riley Leonard is the Riley Leonard that we have seen at times, this game shouldn't be close. Navy does not have the explosiveness to come back. They have the explosiveness when they're able to still have 5-minute drives, and really bleed the clock even when they do score fast. So Notre Dame's got to use the speed. They've struggled with wide receivers, which is also something that's been bad. Um, for them, it's why they lost to NIU. It's why it was so close versus Texas A&M. They were the better team against Texas A&M that day. But the wide receivers made it closer, made it harder for Riley Leonard. So there's a lot of moving parts here. I'm going to take Notre Dame, and I think this is going to be probably, well, I'd say top three most entertaining games of this weekend for the first three quarters. I think Notre Dame kind of stretches the lead in the fourth, gets away from it. But like I said, I think there's a world where Navy just dominates time of possession, and because they know if they give Notre Dame the ball, they're probably scoring. So we'll see what this is. This could be a game where both teams score 40. It could be a game where 17 points wins you the game. So this is going to be an interesting one for sure. I'm going to go with the Fighting Irish. They take care of business there at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah, so we agree on that. Again, this is a game where we both get to see and everyone gets to see what Notre Dame's about, what Navy's about, and it's going to be a fun one, whether it's low scoring or high scoring. I'm loving it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really stuck between because I just don't know. But moving on to our final game of our slate, a team that has had a good season, but obviously had a setback a few weeks ago at A&M versus a team that's just fallen off. They've imploded. We got Mizzou versus Alabama. It's gonna be a fun one to watch. Still, it's gonna be really interesting to see how Missouri handles Alabama, how Bama bounces back after the Tennessee loss. I'll leave the floor to you. What are your expectations out of this game?
So my expectations, not expectations, but um, if Alabama, more of a statement, if Alabama loses this game, Tuscaloosa is going to be on fire. They might actually burn down the city. They might burn down the stadium if they lose this game. And for that reason, I think Alabama comes out and absolutely whoops Missouri. I think Kalen DeBoer doesn't have a choice. It's either lock in or get off. Like that. That's really what it is. I really think that this week of practice, if it's anything like I think as a coach and seeing my dad coach for so many years, even though it's at the high school level. Um, After a loss, those practices are grinding, especially a second loss. And basically you're getting knocked out of the playoff. Kalen DeBoer is feeling heat from the media, and then Kalen DeBoer puts the heat on his players. So that's good. What's going to happen? It's a whole chain reaction. I think that maybe they were even tackling in practice. I could see that happening, which is wild to say for a D1 football team at this point. But I think Alabama wins by 20. I really think that they destroy it. Missouri, I think it's similar to Texas A&M Missouri. I am not sold on them. The passing game has not improved enough. The run game's good, but Alabama could really stuff that up. But at the same time, Dylan Sampson had a great game last week. So this is going to be entertaining. There's so many different headlines, but I got the Crimson Tide rolling uh, the Tigers here and getting back on track, but it might be too little too late at this point. Andrew, what do you think?
I agree. I think Bama's going to win this game. I fear for Brady Cook. I really do because I agree. I think this is going to be one of the most intense practice weeks I think Alabama's had in a while. Definitely after a loss like that, they're going to be running, they're going to be hitting, it's going to be physical, they're going to be fired up. And I'm taking Bama because I do believe that the leadership within from the coaching staff and the players we'll be able to get them to refocus, understand, okay, we might be out of the playoffs, but let's not make this season a wash. Let's not make this catastrophic. And I think it's going to be similar to how Ole Miss responded when they played South Carolina after the Kentucky loss. I think they're going to go out, they're going to play hard. It's a good team. Missouri could easily beat them. Missouri is not a scrub team like they have been in the past. This was a team that not too long ago was top 10. So, I fear that Bama has to play from the jump, though. They have to get out an early lead and build on it because if they go down like 7-0, 10-0, they might implode. So it really is about that. I think Milrow knows that. I think Milrow will step up as a leader. He'll play really well. Like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Brady Cook from the pocket. If they can get to him a lot, make him uncomfortable, Bama will win this easily. But it could also go the other way. Like I said, we're either going to see the greatest, turnaround in 2 weeks, or we're going to see the biggest implosion. But I'm taking Alabama by 14. I think it'll be close the whole game, but I think Bama will start to pull away in the fourth.
There is a chance, and this is completely unlike a Nick Saban coach team. I genuinely think that we could see Alabama players fighting each other on the sideline if they are losing in this game. And that's terrible. If I was Kalen DeBoer, Malachi Moore would never play again, based on what he did. He would be sitting the bench. But the fact that he was back out there against Tennessee tells me a lot about how Kalen DeBoer doesn't really value discipline. So that tells me as Andrew said, if they get down 7-0, like 7-0, you come back from that in a second. They literally were losing to USF by more than that, and they came back and ended up beating them by 20 plus. But I could see them definitely implode. I think the fans will get on them. There's possible boo birds in play if they're losing to Missouri at halftime, which is wild. But I got to think they rise to the task, right? Like you got to think so. I mean, they've dominated college football for the last 15 years. I hope. I hope, or everything that I knew is a lie.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single thing in my brain that could like comprehend or even imagine Bama going and potentially losing a third in a season. Like it doesn't feel real. Like I can't comprehend the idea if they're trailing at halftime or if they lose this game, what it's going to feel like. Like my brain always is just hardwired to say, okay, Alabama's going to bounce back, but they might not.
Yeah. I mean, you can get punched so many times, but the weakest fall, the earlier in the punches, and we will see how tested this Alabama team is. And I expect them to show up, and Andrew does too. But there is a chance. I mean, we're sitting here. I'm sitting here in New Jersey. Andrew's in Virginia. Not a single one of us has watched Alabama's practices. We don't know what's going on there. But who knows? It will be an exciting week for sure. Do you have any closing thoughts before we end off? No?
Let's hope for another good week. And like I said, we're going to get closer and closer to that committee ranking. So we're going to learn a lot, and I'm fired up for it.
Yeah, me too. And, now we're in the meat of it. Every single week, there's a game that determines a team season. So this is going to be great and awesome. We didn't even get to touch on some of the other great games that we'll talk about on TikTok and later in the week as well. But I am Tyler. Thank you, Andrew, as always, my co-host, for joining us. This has been Sideline Signal. We will be back with you for the NFL recap and look forward as well, which we are excited to do. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. We love responding to your comments on YouTube. And then we're also on TikTok at Sideline Signal. Remember to follow, like, and comment there as well as we post daily and weekly content there. So thank you guys so much for listening, and let's watch some football.